Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. This is actually our third exploration together into, well, the really intricate world of the Oedipal triangle. We've laid some groundwork in our previous discussions, looked at the foundations, and today we're taking a turn that, honestly, for many people, is a total game changer in understanding these really profound dynamics. So let's unpack this a bit. We're diving into a really pivotal, eye-opening paper by Shteiner. It's called The Struggle for Dominance in the Oedipal Situation. Now, if you're like most people, when you hear Oedipal situation, your mind probably jumps straight to, forbidden desires, rivalry, maybe a bit of guilt, that classic narrative, right? The child wanting one parent, clashing with the other. But Shteiner, he really broadens our understanding in a powerful way. He invites us to see it not just as like a struggle of forbidden longing, but as something much more fundamental, a primitive battle over power or dominance, and maybe even psychological survival within that triangle. It's far more visceral than we often think.
It really is. And what's truly fascinating here, maybe even revolutionary, is how Shteiner goes beyond those classic libidinal aspects, the desire and the prohibitive aspects, right, the parental no. He brings to light this intense foundational struggle for control that kind of underpins all the Oedipal dynamics. And it impacts not just how the child sees and relates to their parents out there in the world, but how these really powerful figures get internalized, how they shape the very architecture of the child's inner world. It's a crucial shift in perspective. It reveals a deeper, you could say more primal layer to a concept we thought we already understood pretty well.
That's a really powerful way to put it. Yeah, a primal layer. So our mission today really is to dig into Steiner's central points. We want to help you grasp how this profound layer of power and survival shapes our earliest relationships and how it, echoes through our adult lives. Get ready for some potential aha moments, I think. So when we typically think Oedipal, it often simplifies down to like a child's desire for one parent, rivalry with the other. Wanting mom, seeing dad as the rival or the other way around, and then the guilt that comes with it. But Shteiner argues there's something far more primitive, more foundational at play underneath all that. It's not just about who you want or who you can't have. It's about a very early, very intense fight for psychological territory, for your position.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Shteiner basically says the Oedipal situation is fundamentally about the child's attempt to dominate the parental couple. And this isn't just, wishing to swap places with dad in a simple way. It's a deep-seated struggle for control, for survival against what can feel like this overwhelmingly powerful combined parental force. Just imagine for a second a young child perceiving their parents' intimate, exclusive relationship. Psychoanalysts call it the combined object. It's not just two people. It's this powerful, unified entity. And to the child's nascent sense of self, it can feel overwhelmingly self-sufficient, sometimes almost annihilating. This intense pairing, this unit, can be experienced as a direct threat, almost an existential threat to the child's developing identity.
Wow. So, okay, it's not just a kid feeling a bit left out when mom and dad have their own thing. It's more like they experience this parental unit as this formidable, almost monolithic entity that they have to contend with just to survive psychologically.
That's the idea.
That completely shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from purely sexual desire to something more primal, like a life or death struggle for a secure place. And the only way a child in those very early stages might feel they can handle that perceived threat is by trying to assert their own dominance, trying to break up that powerful combined object or somehow gain control over it. It's like a fight just to matter.
Exactly, a fight to establish their own space and significance.
Okay, here's where it gets really intense, I think. Shteiner doesn't pull any punches about the raw, potent emotions involved here. This struggle for dominance, it's not gentle. It's fueled by primitive aggression and really profound envy. We're talking about feelings that are much more raw, less modulated than the later kinds of rivalry we might recognize. It's almost like a fight for psychological survival and territory.
And that raises a really important question, doesn't it? How does a child or, later an adult manage such overwhelming feelings, especially when facing this formidable combined object? Shteiner points towards the deployment of primitive defense mechanisms. The child might unconsciously try to break up the parental bond, maybe insert themselves into it through various means, often unconsciously. For instance, you might see a child acting out, creating chaos, maybe even becoming ill. These can all be seen as unconscious attempts to disrupt the parent's connection, redirect their focus onto the child. So the aggression isn't just aimed at a parent as a rival, it's aimed at the very idea of their unity, because that unity feels so threatening.
Right, so it's not just wishing dad would go away so you can have mom all to yourself. It's about actively, maybe unconsciously, trying to dismantle the perceived power structure of the parental couple itself. And this can look like desperate attempts to control the parents, maybe destroy the relationship, or, yeah, replace one parent, but with a much deeper, more aggressive feel to it. And Steiner links this very closely to Melanie Klein's work, right? Her groundbreaking ideas, particularly what she called the envy of the link between the parents. That's key here.
Absolutely key.
It's not just envying what mom or dad have individually. It's envying the connection itself, that powerful, seemingly self-sufficient bond that makes them this formidable unit.
Exactly. That intense envy of the parental bond often leads the child to, well, attack the very link connecting the parents. And to manage the overwhelming anxiety and aggression this stirs up, they might use primitive defenses, like splitting, for instance, where parents get divided into all good and all bad figures because holding the complexity of both good and bad in one person is just too much to bear at that stage. Then there's projection, where their own aggressive impulses are unconsciously sort of put onto the parents. So the parents then seem persecutory, and maybe the most complex one is projective identification, where parts of the child's self are unconsciously put into the parents in an attempt to kind of control them from the inside. These are really characteristic of what Klein called the paranoid schizoid position. You can think of it as a very early, often terrifying stage of development. The child's internal world is fragmented. Good and bad are kept rigidly apart. Threats feel incredibly real and persecutory, both from inside and out. So the child's attack isn't just on the parents as individuals, it's on the very bond that makes them this powerful, unified couple. Because that bond feels so incredibly threatening to their own fragile, burgeoning sense of self.
Wow. It really sounds like the child's mind is a kind of battleground then, doesn't it? So these early struggles, they aren't just, external skirmishes happening in the family living room. They leave a lasting and indelible imprint on our internal world. These battle scars deep inside our psyche fundamentally shape how we see ourselves, how we relate to others, long, long after childhood.
Precisely. The way the child tries to internalize that parental couple, whether they're trying to gain control over it internally or just manage the perception of their combined power, that really lays the groundwork for later psychological health or potentially for pathology. If this struggle remains unresolved, if the child can't move past these primitive desires to dominate and destroy the parental bond, well, it can lead to pretty significant difficulties in adulthood. These might show up as chronic struggles with reality testing, or maybe a persistent gnawing envy of other people's connections or successes, or even a profound inability to form mature, integrated relationships themselves. Think about someone who consistently seems to sabotage their own relationships or feels constantly threatened by the intimacy others share. Steiner would probably suggest that echoes of this early dominant struggle are very likely at play there.
That's a powerful connection to make. And it sounds like the actual strength and stability of the parent relationship itself plays a huge role here, almost a protective role.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if the parents manage to maintain a reasonably secure, loving bond, perhaps that helps the child tolerate the exclusion, manage their envy better. But if the parental relationship is fragile, chaotic, maybe even abusive, that might just intensify the child's perception of threat and their desperate need to dominate because there's no safe foundation.
You've hit on a crucial point. The child's fear isn't just, say, of parental punishment for their desires. It's often a much deeper fear. A fear of the parent's perceived power to destroy the child's own internal world or their connection to a loved object, like a good internal mother or father figure. A strong, stable parental relationship provides a kind of contained space. It models connection in a way that, paradoxically, allows the child to eventually tolerate being excluded and find their own separate place. Without that reliable container, the internal world can feel fragmented, constantly under attack. And what's more, these conflicts don't just evaporate with age. The persistence of these early dominance struggles in the adult's internal world keeps reflecting those early parental dynamics. They play out again and again in various adult relationships, internal conflicts, often completely unconsciously.
Okay, this all sounds quite intense, maybe even a bit daunting for listeners thinking about their own histories. But there has to be a path forward. A resolution that allows for healthier development. Steiner talks about a truly profound Oedipal triumph. But it's not about winning a battle against your parents, is it? It's about overcoming something inside yourself. How does he frame this triumph?
Right, that's the key distinction. This triumph isn't just about giving up the desire for a parent because you're scared of a punishment. That's the more, let's say, traditional view. Steiner takes us much deeper. The triumph he describes is about overcoming that more primitive drive the drive to dominate and destroy the parental couple, or at least their internal representations. It's about managing to move beyond those destructive impulses, relinquishing the need for absolute control, and being able to accept the reality of the parental bond without feeling annihilated or fragmented by it. This is a monumental shift for the developing psyche. It's a truly hard-won psychological victory.
So if someone, whether as a child or later as an adult through therapy, perhaps successfully navigates this intense internal struggle, what's the outcome? What does this triumph actually lead to? What does it look like in terms of personal growth?
Well, the outcome of a successful resolution is really profound. It's the development of the capacity for genuine love, like unselfish love, and for authentic gratitude, and for a much more realistic, integrated perception of other people, both internal figures and external people in their lives. Creative energies, which might have previously been channeled into those primitive struggles for dominance and destruction, can now be redirected into more constructive, fulfilling activities and relationships. Instead of unconsciously trying to break connections, the individual becomes capable of making and sustaining their own healthy links. You see this in people who can genuinely collaborate, who can tolerate differences without feeling threatened, who are less driven by envy and more by, say, admiration or inspiration.
Okay, this sounds very much like what some psychoanalytic thinkers might call reaching the third position. Is that related?
Exactly that. Reaching the third position is absolutely key here in Steiner's framework, too. It represents the psychological ability to tolerate being excluded from the primary couple, to acknowledge their bond without feeling destroyed or needing to launch those destructive attacks. It's about accepting your own individuality, recognizing you're a separate person with your own desires, your own needs, and crucially, being able to form independent, integrated relationships that aren't constantly overshadowed by those earlier dominant struggles. This acceptance allows for the formation of a healthier superego. Think of it as an internal, more benign parental function, one that supports independent thought, fosters creativity, and helps regulate aggression and desire effectively, rather than being this constantly punitive, persecuting internal voice. It's really the difference between having an internal critic that's always beating you down and having an internal guide that's encouraging you to grow.
That makes sense. And it feels like Steiner's insights here also resonate quite strongly with other deep concepts in psychoanalytic thought. I'm thinking particularly of Bion's work, maybe, which also touches on these foundational ideas of connection and breakdown.
Oh, absolutely. There's a powerful connection to Bion's concept of attacks on linking. Bion described how sometimes patients might unconsciously attack the links between thoughts, between feelings, or even between themselves and their analyst, making understanding feel impossible. In this Oedipal context, the child's dominant struggle can definitely be seen as an attack on the very bond, the link that makes the parents a powerful, unified couple. But also, and this is crucial, it can be an attack on the child's own developing capacity for linking, their ability to connect their own thoughts, feelings, and experiences in a coherent way. When their capacity for containment, their ability to hold and process difficult emotions becomes sufficiently robust, the child can better tolerate the pain of exclusion. And eventually, they can integrate the parental couple internally in a less destructive, more realistic manner. It really is about building internal bridges instead of constantly, unconsciously trying to destroy them.
So, okay, wrapping this up a bit, what does this all really mean for us listening today? Steiner's work fundamentally shifts how we might understand the Oedipal triangle. It reveals it not just as this stage for desire and prohibition, but as a crucible. A crucible where these primitive struggles for power, dominance, and survival profoundly shape our psyche. It really underscores the incredible intensity of our earliest emotional experiences and how deeply they affect us throughout life, often in ways we're not even aware of.
It definitely encourages more critical thinking about how these very early relational patterns, steeped in these struggles for control and survival, might continue to play out in our adult lives, in our relationships, sure, but also our careers, maybe even our internal dialogue with ourselves. Recognizing this deeper layer offers, I think, a really powerful lens for self-reflection, for understanding why we might sometimes react to situations with a sense of threat or a need for control that seems maybe out of proportion to what's actually happening in the present moment. It's about potentially tracing those very old, very powerful pathways that still subtly influence us, every single day.
Absolutely. And that leads us nicely to a final, maybe provocative thought for you to mull over after this deep dive. How does recognizing this powerful struggle for dominance in the Oedipal situation reframe your understanding of the subtle power dynamics, the patterns of control that you observe in your own relationships and interactions today? Do you see any echoes, maybe, of those early battles playing out in unexpected ways?
perhaps in a conversation, a negotiation at work, or even just in your own internal struggles? We invite you to consider that question as you continue your journey of learning. Join us next time on The Deep Dive as we continue our exploration into the complexities of human psychology. Until then, keep questioning, keep reflecting, and keep learning.